basically what I'm going to be talking about today is ways in which you can get inspired by your own experiences, and then also how you can publish things in multiple formats. And it's really easy today using KDP, Kindle, Draft to Digital, other digital platforms. So why don't I start the slideshow, and then I'll talk to that. So anyway, one of the things I do is I specialize in writing, self-publishing, and film scripts. And so I'll talk a little bit about all of those different things as I talk about it. Okay, so my goal in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about, I have done a social media campaign. I've written a series of articles on Medium, and I've done video sizzle reels. And you can use all of these techniques in marketing yourself. Social media posts are things that you can do on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and you can use, there are various techniques you can use so that you can schedule your post in advance. You can use Hootsuite, you can use Buffer, and basically what they do is you put the article in, you schedule certain times, you indicate the platforms where you want it to go, you click a few buttons, and then it just goes out there. And so I have 9 platforms that I use at the time. I've been doing articles on Medium, which is a very easy to use platform. There's no charge for it. You can subscribe and get articles from it for $5 a month. And so it's a very easy platform to use. It takes a couple of minutes. Video sizzle reels, I've been making those. I've done about 100 of them, starting with doing them for a client, and now I'm doing them for myself. And essentially what you do is you put, for your book, you would put photographs, you would put video clips to illustrate what your book is about. And you would start with a copy of your book cover in the beginning. And so anyway, I'll show you a little bit more about how to apply these techniques in your own experiences. So some of the topics I talk about is what I've learned from writing, publishing, and producing books, articles, feature films, promotional videos, and then I'll be talking about how you can do it too. And I do workshops and seminars on these topics. All right, so some of the tips I use for creative projects is I use visualization to imagine what I want to write about or create videos about. I see the scenes playing out in my mind. And you can train yourself to do this. I started off in my 20s, and I went to a number of workshops and seminars on hypnosis. I went to Esalen. And so these are ways in which I learned how to visualize and see things in the moment. And so if you can start doing that, it's a way to, in a sense, see scenes play out in front of you, to see things you're going to be writing about. They work them out in your mind. You can also train yourself to dream about these things. So before you go to sleep, you give yourself a mental hook or a couple of words or sentences to say, well, I want to dream about this. And then if you train yourself over a period of time, it becomes more automatic. And you can also if you keep some paper by your bedside, you can learn to write quickly. Anyway, once you know what you want to do, then you develop a schedule of what to do when. And I've heard people talk about having writer's block. And one way to get over it is to just simply set a time that you're going to do some work. And then you just sit there in front of your computer, and eventually, you'll start writing. And you may feel distracted at first, but after a while, it becomes automatic. And so I've learned how to go in front of the computer and I just start writing, or I have a piece of paper and I just start writing. And so it becomes routine. It may start out a little bit as a struggle, but then I start doing it. You also should be open to making changes along the way, so you stay flexible. And if you start getting tips on the market on what to do, what's better to do, then you would adapt. So one of the things, for example, we're all experiencing the coronavirus struggle now. So I've started doing some songs and poems about that, some books about dealing with fear and anxiety. So you want to be aware of what's going on around you and adapt to the moment. And I've noticed in the Chronicle, people are writing poems about the coronavirus. There are articles about how to come through it. So people are dealing with this in different ways, but there's a whole literature that's sort of turning out for the last, I guess, 5 or 6 weeks that we've been in isolation, and it looks like it's going to be another month or so right now. So I guess be able to adapt. Like for example, I just experienced something called Meet Away, where people, you choose what groups you want to be in, and then they connect you up with 5 or 6 people in your field or on your topic, and then you start meeting people. And so I met an agent as a result of that. I met people who are aspiring writers, and I just sent some things off to the agent. So I mean, you never know what's going to happen, but be open to these different techniques, technologies, and you may find that you can also adapt. You see things that are needs. I've noticed that people are now designing masks for the experience, and then every few weeks assess how things are going and decide on your priorities to what to do. All right. So anyway, I started doing some documentary films, and these are some examples. As I've been getting older, I've been thinking about, what do we need to do to stay healthy, to live longer? And there's a whole community of people in the Silicon Valley who are investing money into aging cures, or maybe just so people live longer. And there are all these technologies now of taking your brain, putting it into another body, or mechanical devices. So, I mean, they're all people who are doing these things. So I started writing some books about aging, and so they turned into a film, because a lot of the things I do turn into a film. I work with a film team, and so it became the new age of aging. And, all right, so anyway, to tips on finding inspiration, I find tips and things happening in my life or in the news for books and films. And as I mentioned, the new age of aging was inspired because I began thinking about health and wellness topics. And I wrote a book on the topic, The Science of Living Longer, where I researched all of these different communities involved in research on how we can live longer. And so I wondered what seniors can do to live healthy, active, healthy lives. And so anyway, for inspiration on what you should write or post about, think about what's happening in your life or in the news you can find of special interest. And I've noticed a number of articles by columnists on how they are dealing with the coronavirus. I also have been following some of the comics who have talked about the everyday life. A lot of it's about the latest thing Trump is doing on the Noah Trevor show, Daily Life. I've been watching Seth Meyer. Anyway, Colfield and Kohlberg rather. And so, they kind of have ideas about what's going on in life, and they do little blogs about that, or little shows. So you might think about that. Do a podcast, or start creating your own live videos and post them out to the world, and talk about how your work can help other people, because that's what people are really interested in now. And so, besides talking about rather than talking about your own experiences so much, talk more about how whatever you're doing can help other people, because people really are interested in that kind of thing right now. Another thing I've talked about is repurposing your material in multiple formats. And this is a way to increase your impact and influence by sharing your message in multiple media and deciding the best approach for you. So there are about 20 different ways in which you can share your message. And the more you can do that, the more you could reach out to different audiences, because different people have different ways of processing information. They like to receive their information in different ways. Some people are more visual and they want to see videos. So maybe think about how you can turn your material into a video. You do a PowerPoint presentation, and then you can turn that into a video. And I use a technique technology called Camtasia. And there are a number of these video platforms where you can combine photos, video clips, and put music in it. And they're very easy to master. I remember about 10 years ago when I first started exploring getting into films myself. I had been writing scripts, but I hadn't been producing anything. And there was a community media group. And I took some editing courses with them, and it seemed so complicated that I thought I never wanted to edit anything. But now the tools are so easy, and so you don't have to be a professional, and there are video platforms you can use. And so I use a number of them with animated graphics, and you just, they have little graphic designs, and they can really look at all sorts of crazy things and active things can happen. And let me say, I'm seeing some things on the side about upgrading, and I'll take those away. So, just look into these different technologies that can help you get your message out there. And the technologies are just amazing today online. I mean, I can't imagine if we had the coronavirus and we didn't have these technologies to communicate with people. We would be just lost. And now we have all these video platforms to work with. All right, so anyway, how I developed this multimedia approach is I wrote a half a dozen books for a client and worked with a publicist, social media expert, and website designer. And I had one client who wanted to break through as a speaker on criminal justice issues. So maybe think about your own platform. What do you want to specialize in? And where do you stand out? How are you different? What do you bring to the table that's new compared to other people in that field? And so a lot of people talk about self-help books or popular business books, but what can make them different is if you could bring in your own experience to that. So anyway, we started looking at what he could write about. And so the books alone weren't enough to interest the media, politicians, and speakers organization. And so I developed a campaign using all kinds of media. So we did blogs, articles, press releases, videos, PowerPoint presentations, short books from 1 or 2 chapters, compilation books. And what I mean by that is you can take a book or two or a chapter or two, as long as you have 24 pages or more, you can publish it on KDP. So you might think about, well, okay, you can turn an article into a short book if it's a long enough article, let's say 1,000 words or more, maybe 2,000 words. And so you basically turn that into a book. You might use illustrations to expand the number of pages, and then you have a book about that. And so then after you get a number of chapters together, you compile that into a complete book. So it's an easy way to quickly get books out there, and then a compilation book. So I did that with, I started with 10 tips to do this, 10 tips to do that, and then I combined them into a book called 100 Ways to Do This, and one of them is 100 Ways to Achieve More Success. You can also put them into online courses, and if you need help with doing that, there are virtual assistants who can create these courses for you, where you turn your material into a course. You can turn them into webinars. A lot of times people marketing these programs will do a webinar to introduce people to a larger topic. And so the webinar is usually free, and it's usually about 60 minutes to 90 minutes. And then if people are interested, then they can click on something, and usually at that point they're selling a course, and those courses can range anywhere from about $47 to $997. I mean, they just depend on how much is in it and how advanced the topic is. So anyway, think about how you might increase your own impact and influence by repurposing your own material in multiple formats. So another thing is to take a particular project and use this in different formats. So I would give an example is, I have this idea for dog types. And if you are familiar with the DISC system or the color profiling system, you can then imagine putting dogs in those different categories. So, for example, you have a German Shepherd who's really active, aggressive. You have a Pomeranian who's sort of fun. A Border Collie is a more researcher type, and then the Golden Retriever who's more the helper type. So I had gone to a course on presenting yourself to different sales groups using different personality types. And I had been working on various dogs, and I had a program called You Look Like Your Dog, and I had noticed that personalities deal with are like dogs. So I had written this book called What's Your Dog Type? And so then I adapted it to business in the workplace. And then that turned into a film called Me, My Dog, and I, comparing people who looked like their dogs or had personalities like their dogs. And I was compared to owners of big dogs and little dogs. So I started looking into different ways of using this particular category. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to skip over this, but I basically noticed a lot of people look like their dogs, and then I learned about the system, and I turned it into a book called Using the Dog Type System, Success in Work and Business. We did some seminars and workshops, and one of the things you could do now is you could have somebody videotape your program, and so then you can make copies of that. You can put that into a video yourself that you can replay for people. And then I also did a workbook on the work in business. So you can think about maybe some things you could do could lend themselves to be turned into a workbook to teach other people. So anyway, think about the different ways you might branch out from one idea to many others, create articles, books, videos as spin-offs. So anyway, the different platforms to use for repurposing your material. I've listed them as, and the book, the Increase Your Impact and Influence, I talk about how you can adapt each of these kinds of blogs or formats. So blogs and articles is one thing. Books, audiobooks are easy to do. Once you publish a book on Amazon, you can get a narrator on ACX to do it. There are also a number of people who do audio books, and you can just pay people and you have control of the book. What I've chosen to do is I work with ACX, and you basically select the book that's already on Amazon. You say you're looking for a narrator for it, and if enough people think your project is of interest, they will audition for it, and then you can choose among the people auditioning. And usually I get anywhere between 2 to 5 people who audition for different books. And I found that with the shorter books, I'm more likely to more quickly get people because they feel like they can do a book in about 20 minutes, 10 minutes, because it's so short. So, as long as you have it published as a book on Amazon, it's enough for people to apply for it or audition for it. PowerPoint copy, and then you can turn that into a video using something like Camtasia, which I mentioned before, social media posts, and it can be very time consuming when you do these. And Hootsuite can help, but if you're doing this on a regular basis and you're doing it frequently, it can help to hire a virtual assistant. And you can find them through Fiverr, you can find them locally, and the costs range anywhere from about $5 or $10 if you get them on Fiverr, and but for more simple things, maybe you could use them for posts. But locally, it's more like about $25 to about $35 for a virtual assistant on an hourly basis. You can do online courses, and then as you do things, put out press releases about what you're doing, and create marketing materials based on to promote your book in different ways, and then of course website copy, and consider your website copy a little bit like a home brochure. And almost everybody has a website today, and you can use cheap formats like Wix or professional designers to do it. And I've been working with one designer who's done about 20 websites for me over about a 10-year period. Okay, so anyway, so a little about me, how I got started. I published over 200 books at this point, and the mix of traditional publishers and through Changemakers Publishing. I got a doctorate in sociology, and then I don't know, I somehow got into going to school, and it was hard to leave it. I finally did about 2 years ago. I decided not to get a history degree, and I thought I would just write about Vikings on my own rather than having to take all of these background courses. So those are some of the courses that I've taken as I've done things. So the way I got started in doing so many different things, it was really hard for me to decide what to do, throughout life. And because I've had so many different experiences and had so many different interests, and I was never sure what I wanted to do. And so one of the things that I found enabled me to explore a lot of these interests was becoming a writer, because you can pretty much write about anything. And if you're not an expert on something, you can just interview people to ask them to, you quote them. And so for my criminal justice person, initially we did a series of articles on it where he wrote his memoir, and I wrote about the criminal justice system from my background, because that's one of the things I studied. And so half the book was his memoir, half was criminal justice. He didn't really think of it as an expert. We started doing some articles, and then I said, well, I don't think I should put my name on this. I think you should be the expert. And so I just ended up ghostwriting a bunch of articles for him. And then after about 2 years of this, we had several books. You know, he suddenly started thinking of himself as an expert. So this is one way in which you can become an expert yourself, is if you draw on the work of other people initially, and then after a while you become, people come to you as an expert in the field, and eventually you can kind of adopt the mantle and you can accept that you are now an expert. So anyway, when I was a little kid, I sold worms when I was 6, was my first experience in marketing. I had comic books that people would get as they, if they bought a worm, and then I found the comic books did better than the worms, so I switched to that. I did a local paper, it's called The Peep at 7. My mother did mimeographs at school, and so I would go around the neighborhood doing these papers, and we had all these neighbors who would get this little mimeograph paper, and I would write about school experiences. And that's, if you're a teacher, you work at school, this is the great way to develop kids' books where you write about things you experience, but you imagine what it'd be like as a kid, what their experience and perception would be. So you write a kid's book from their point of view, and within an hour or two, you can write a kid's book because they're really short. They're only about 300 to 1,000 words for a picture book. I sold charms by my bike at 14. And, you know, then I found at art school, I used more paper than anyone else. And I just sort of found that that was sort of my medium, is just writing a lot of things, writing them really quickly. And then I gradually became, you know, more experienced in doing that. Anyway, I interned at a New York publishing company. I kept changing my major. I wrote my first book for my PhD dissertation, and then I gradually did some participant observation books when I was studying anthropology and sociology. And then I got into marketing and sales when there was a recession in 1983, and I realized that people weren't so much interested in anthropology and sociology anymore, but they were getting into these different marketing campaigns. So I wrote a book about multi-level marketing and how to do it. So one of the things you want to think about when if you're doing a memoir or something about yourself, is to think about how you can apply it to other people. And so what a lot of people do with memoirs is half the book may be the memoir, and then half the book will be a how-to. Or they integrate them and they alternate chapters, or you have takeaways in when you're writing a memoir. And so at the end of a chapter, you do that. And Rudy Giuliani did a book like that when he was mayor of New York, I don't know, it's about 20 years ago, where he wrote about his leadership skills. And he would talk about how he became a mayor and what he did in his life. And so anyway, so then when the whole market changed around 15 years ago, it used to be that I published my books with mainstream publishers. And then about 15 years ago, the whole market changed. And then suddenly the amount of money you would get in advance went down. Instead of getting 10, 15, 20,000 for a book, they were offering 3,000, 4,000, or the big publishers weren't open to people just writing books if they weren't a big celebrity or on TV. So self-publishing became really big at that point. But if you do self-publishing, it's also important to do the marketing and promotion, because otherwise your book is one of millions. So anyway, as a longtime entrepreneur, I did games, and I've also started Changemakers games. You'll see a bunch of the games that I did. At the time that I started doing it, the women in business was not really a thing, and so I pretended to be a secretary of a company, and I went around as the secretary representing this company headed up by David Franklin, and because, you know, women just really weren't running businesses at that time, and it was the beginning of women entrepreneurs movement. I wrote a bunch of songs, and I have a website with demos. And then one of the things is adapting it to the current marketplace. And so right now there's a lot of interest in fear, anxiety, dealing with the coronavirus. So I started writing a series of books about that, or a series of songs. I work with a person in Texas who does these songs for $19 each. And so I sent them out to him. He did some songs, and they're on YouTube. And so I wrote some songbooks about that. I compiled the songs into a songbook with pictures. I also have a service for creating promotional videos, which you can see at mypromeo.com, and it's almost completed. But if you want to get videos created to promote your books, this can help you do that. And okay, so anyway, to my latest books, I got interested in the Neanderthals, and I started thinking about what would happen if they came back. I put campaigns on Shopify, and then I wrote about my experience. So essentially, think about anything you do as something that could be applied in your life, and that maybe could help other people in their life. The Increase Your Impact and Influence is the book I mentioned about. The World of the Imps is another one that was a kid's book that I did. So anyway, these are some things about responding to the latest news. So the 100 Ways to Understand and Deal with Your Fear and Anxiety started out as a series of articles on Medium. They have one page then they have a blank page because people can write their tips on it. And then I also have pictures that go along with this. Feel-good songbook with these, where I combine these songs into books. And then these are different formats that I use. These are PowerPoint presentations that got turned into videos. So the songs became videos. They became books with songs. So, I just try to think about all the different ways that I could create them. So think about in your own experience and what you're writing about, how you can turn these, your books, your articles into videos. And so those are some songs that I did where I did little videos. Okay, so I did books on social issues and trends, and these are topics of latest news and causes, the new Middle Ages. And then basically a small publisher did it. I got the rights back. I turned it into another book. And I think now it's really very apropos about what's going on. And so I think it'll have, we publish it, and I think it'll have a new life today. And you can always adapt it. You change the forward, you change the background, the topics, you incorporate new topics. And so you can make an older book you've done with history or something else related to a previous time into some a more modern experience that people can relate to. And so, always look at ways of refreshing older books, and you can bring them back. So this is my Science of Living Longer book, very next thing. So these were about social trends and transformations. Then I did a series of self-help books for success and how to become more creative and productive, positive to achieve your goals. And I did a vision board book. And I've been to a number of workshops on doing vision boards, and usually there are these very large formats where you have a big poster board. But I thought about, you could also turn this into a book where you, instead of writing your ideas on this big format, you have you create this vision board in such form of a book. I did a series of books on inspiring and motivating people, and that I'm doing this series. This fear and anxiety was sort of in the same format where I took quotes from people and turned them into books. And then I went to a workshop on where we used animals as visualization. And so I thought, that could be a great idea to get ideas. So that became a way of applying some techniques that I've used in the past using a different format. And these are visualizations. Some of these started out a long time ago. One of the dreams into reality adapted mind power into that. And then I also work with dreams, and I have a book about dreams. In this case, these are not so much dreams, they're actual dreams, but what you're imagining in your own life. And Want to See it, get it. But it started off actually back in 1987 as a way of visualizing your way to success as mind power. And you can always change titles of books. So, for example, if you want to find a traditional publisher, you would not send a book that's already published. I mean, unless it's done really well and gotten a super good track record. Publishers don't want to have a book that's already published. So if it's already published, it hasn't done very well, you just change the name of it and repackage it again. So I'm redoing that. This started off as Mind Power, and then I sold it as Want to See it, get it to Amacomp. I got the rights back, and then I published it myself. And now I'm looking at ways of, maybe kind of bringing it back and bringing in some modern ideas about modern technologies and referring to that. And then I started using dreams, and these are different ways of adapting your dreams. I've done a series of success in business books. So any kind of business you're in, think about tips you can get out of that you could apply for other people. And so I started writing books about how to have a sales party, and it was originally published as The Complete Idiot's Guide to Sales Parties. And then when I got the rights back, I republished it as that. So, think about that. If you get rights back to any books that you already published, think about how you might republish them again in a different format, and then publish them yourself under a different title. And you might think about these smaller books, maybe divide it up, because people have lower attention spans these days. So at one time, a lot of these books used to be about 300, 400 pages. Now people are doing books around 100, 150 pages. And then I mentioned about these short little books. So anyway, these are some other things that I've done. I did a whole series of marketing sales books, and Creating Your First Sales Team came out of my going to the American film market. And I don't really like going to these events myself. So I've got a team of 3 people who went there on my behalf, and I gave them instructions on what to do and who to see and who to talk to and how to talk to them. And so then as a result of that and the materials that I made to help them, I put that into a book for anybody creating a sales team. When I did email marketing, I still do that. But I put together a guidebook on how to do that, and how to make money with your product or service, make money with your book. Now, one of the things you might also think about is some of the same material could go to different markets, but you want to maybe divide it up and change the format or change the title for a different audience. So Make More Money with Your Book was the beginning of it, but then I realized, well, it can also be for the same techniques could be for people who have a product or service. So I looked into, and I just rewrote essentially the book around the idea of product or service. So instead of putting in book, I put product or service. And so you can think about different ways of packaging the same material, but for a different audience. And I've seen a series that are, this is for doctors and dentists. This is for people in real estate. So, if your work can be divided up for different markets, think about just redoing the book, because a more general book might not feel like a fit to somebody, but if once they see that it has their field in it, then you can do it. I've done a series of books on how to write, publish, and promote your book based on my experience. And so as I started learning about these different publishing formats, I started writing books. The first one was Self-Selling Secrets, and then I wrote this one, self-publish your book in multiple formats, and then I did a more detailed guide to it based on doing a video or an audio and visual presentation, and then I took the transcript of what I had done at the workshop, and then I edited that, and that became the guide. It was an expansion of the self-publishing book. So, and then this is this little series of where I did these little short books on a particular topic. Now, these particular books can also be used for people, once we get back to having meetings again in person, can be used as little handouts as a way of getting people to potential clients. So somebody in business might use this as a little format where they have the tips of what they do, and they put this into a little booklet instead of just a little flyer that people might throw away, it becomes this little book. And so I've done these, I've ghostwritten books for people on, or I published their books, which started out as the sort of little PDFs as handouts for them. One person was doing tips on remodeling a kitchen. And so we turned that into a book that he could hand out to people. So anyway, you can think of those as sort of calling cards, but instead it's like a book card that you hand out to people. And it also increases your credibility. If you have tips that you put in it, people read the tips, they feel like, well, you know, I can't remodel my own kitchen, I'm going to hire somebody to do it. So it becomes a sort of a form of business. Then I combine these. Then a lot of these were combined into these books. Now, another important thing is about the cover. So, 100 More Ways to Success started out as I picked out 6 covers and I put them together in a format. And then I realized, well, I need to have a stronger cover, so I redid the cover. You can go to book designers on Fiverr for inexpensive books. There's 99 designs where you have like a bidding war where for about a $300 to $500 budget, you get people to contribute ideas, and then you choose one person to work with. And so I've worked with them as well. But because I've been doing so many books recently, I've been using this approach of photographs and a cover, some copy, and I've been using Camtasia to do that. And the photographs come from stock video houses. And I think that can be a fairly quick and easy way to do your own covers. And so these were other covers that I did with using photographs and images. So you can see some of the images from them that were turned into this larger book. And then I just realized, well, that's not the most impactful cover. So I redid the cover. So you want to think about that, get feedback from people if you're in a group or online now, and have them look at the cover or different versions of the cover and see which strikes them as more effective. All right, so anyway, so these were a series of books that I did on pitching scripts, and then I turned them into a guide to pitching, producing, and distributing films. And this was from my experience in pitching my scripts to get producers and how to make documentaries and finding distributors. So I put that together into a basic book. And then for people doing their own film distribution, because it sometimes can be really hard when somebody's starting out to find a distributor. But we've been lucky and we found distributors from the very beginning. So we've had 7 films now have been completed, and we either have distributors or right now the last 2 we're negotiating the final distributors for them. But if you're going to find a distributor for your film, you need to have a film trailer and a screener. The trailers can be enough to get their interest, but they want to see the finished product. And initially, don't expect to get money up front from distributors. Once you have famous people involved and you have a track record, then maybe you might start getting some money, or you might even get people to take on your film without any money up front, without having to do the screener, because they know that you have a proven track record. But initially, you can get distributors where you basically pay for the E&O, this insurance that you're required to get of if you make any mistakes. They want you to have this E&O insurance. And but beyond that, you basically start up usually with 0 up front from the distributor. And then they start within about, it takes about 9 months once you get a distributor before the film actually comes out, because you have to get them deliverables, you have to, then they have to get them out to the retail channels, and they have to promote them. So it's about a 9-month process between, and it takes a couple months to get the distributor. So you have to think about a year release, and then it takes about another year before you start seeing statements and start getting some money for your film. So my first check was for $1.87 rather than cashing. I'm just framing it. So in creating your own book on books, I've turned out, I turned current experiences into books. Independent publishing is very easy to do. You can write about recent experiences, incidents that affected you, people who motivated and inspired you. And the way I can do it very quickly, and I recommend that you do it too, is to divide the writing process into the creative phase, where you write down whatever you think about. And then you go back as an editor and critique and correct your manuscript. So what I normally do is a first draft and then the editorial polishing at the end. Sometimes when I'm ghostwriting, the client can do the final editorial polish if they want to. And then you can add photographs, set up the manuscript in the desired size, create a cover, possibly the cover template, and you can publish a print-on-demand book. And so I can usually do that in about two hours or so. With clients, it would take a little bit more time because we have to set up the account and finalize the cover and do all those kinds of things that I've already done with my own books. All right, so anyway, these are some examples of the books I've written about finding ghostwriters. I recently did a series of Facebook campaigns, and I talk about the process of doing the campaign. And then I had some earlier books on doing your own PR and turning your blogs into books. So anyway, one of the things about writing for others as a ghostwriter is it gives me a chance to look at the world from others' point of view. Even though I don't agree with someone's ideas, I can write their book or material in their voice. For example, the criminal justice person, which started out as his memoir, he decided his market was political conservatives. So we've written a series of books from that point of view. I don't know that they really work because he's writing these very erudite books to people who don't read very much. But anyway, he's got a whole series of books on the subject. And so I don't necessarily agree with his ideas, but I've written as him. And you can broaden your perspective by understanding others based on their viewpoint. And then I've also been doing some kids' books, and these are really easy, quickly to do. Where you, and if you're a teacher or you know teachers, you can encourage kids to write books, and then maybe they can be compiled together into a book of writing by the kids, or individual books can be written. And again, you can some of the books that I did myself involve hiring a person on Fiverr, such as the Crazy Critters for a visit, and but then some of the books I sold also. So Where's the Avocado, Katie's Blow were sold to other people. And then I did some series of books on animals, Meet the Meerkats, and you could, because meerkats and ducks look pretty much the same, I use stock photos for them. But normally you would people prefer illustrators for books, so it's really better if you can find an illustrator if you're not an illustrator yourself. And so anyway, these are some examples of illustrations I got on Fiverr, and for about $300 I got people to do books for me. All right, so anyway, for writing kids' books, it's a way to recapture your childhood memories. Right now could be a good time to write kids' books because people are trying to escape from everyday reality, and you can think back to your past, and you can view everyday experiences from the eyes of a child. And it's very quick, like 300 to 1,000 words into 32 pages. And I mentioned about finding illustrators. And you can test out a few illustrators by ordering one illustration from each and then decide the illustrator you like best. And then as a script writer, I now have a website devoted to films that Changemakers publish, ChangemakersProductionsFilms.com. So what I've done is I've separated out the new films I've done as a producer of feature films, documentaries, and TV series from older films where I had basically done about 60 different short films with volunteers. And so I wanted to separate the professional work, and I have enough now that I can do that. So these are examples of films that I've done, and these are usually posters, and even before the film is produced, you have a poster for it. So this will tell you a little bit of my background on films. And From Failure to Success, we're currently finishing that up now. Reversal, we're currently in negotiations to finalize who the contract is going to be. And with Failure to Success, we have to get the screeners and trailers done first. So those are a few weeks away from being finished. And then we had some distributors from the mailing I did who expressed interest in seeing that. So anyway, I'm going to go through this quickly because not everybody here is doing films, but I had some weird experiences that I turned into film scripts. And joining writing groups can really help you, and it's a way to get feedback, a way to learn from other people. Many of the groups will have little webinars or sessions where they teach you different techniques. So anyway, one of the things that I started doing to produce my own films is that because it's really hard to sell a script, it's very competitive, but you can. So if you can raise the funds and become a producer, this is a way to get your films made. But one way that I found that helps to sell a script is if you have a sizzle reel where you can really sort of present the idea very quickly to somebody. So they, rather than just reading a synopsis, they basically can see how this works, and a lot of people in the industry don't read very much. They like to see things visually. So this screen trailer can help. If you do a series, you want to do a show Bible, which can be combined with the sizzle reel. So the show Bible is basically, you outline all the different episodes you're going to produce if you're going to do a series. And so if it's a standalone script, you usually need a synopsis, and the sizzle reel can help. If you're going to sell a series, you want a show Bible, which includes all the episodes, and the sizzle reel can help.
This is an amazing array of different kinds of content you can create, written and multimedia. But how do you find and develop an audience for any of the forms of content if you're starting from scratch?
Well, you have to basically, spend the time doing the marketing yourself. And because I do so much production, I don't have a lot of time to do my own marketing. So I work with people like yourself who do publicity, and other people who do social media and do postings. And you have to try out different things because you're not sure what's going to work or not. So you start with small budgets. So say $5 a day, and you see what kind of response you get. There are various platforms like, well, I mentioned Hootsuite and Buffer for sending things out, but there are also different platforms like MailChimp and Constant Contact and iWeber and GetResponse. They basically are autoresponders. And so you start posting your things, you start getting emails. One of the things that they recommend is start building your own email list. And so if people start liking your material, or you do a campaign, it's tied in with, you have a free gift that you offer. So some of these little books could be free gifts that people get. A lot of people who do series is they'll give a gift of their first book of the series. And so then they get the email from people to get the free gift. And then they start doing emails to people. Now you want to be careful about the emails and just do them occasionally, like once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks, once a month. I mean, I have some people who send me emails like daily or a couple of times a day. I mean, that is just overload, and it becomes like spam. So I send them with spam filters. So you want to build up the email list, but then you want to be respectful of the people who are on the list, so you don't overwhelm them with offers. But as you have new books, you can just let them know about them. Or if you're a writer trying to find clients, where, for example, as a ghostwriter, I would look for some of these people who have gotten my book about 10 mistakes that writers make when they first start writing. Then I would pitch them as a ghostwriter because they've established the fact that they're a writer and they're trying to write books. So I would approach them that way. But basically, whatever you're doing, you want to try to build up an email list that you can contact, and you offer this free gift. They go to your website or to a website landing page, and the social media is a way of getting people to go to your landing page or your website, where you have a form that they fill in order to get the free gift, and you don't give it to them right away. You basically have to email it to them. You send them a link to get the PDF, or you send them an email with the PDF. But this way, you want to make sure that you've got the correct email, because sometimes people will put in phony emails to get something. So you want to have this two-step process.
Okay, that's great, and I'm really glad that you brought up that writers or promoters or any kind of content creator should use traditional email. and then try to build up their email list, because a lot of people do things with social media and elsewhere, and I mean, that's fantastic. I'm all for that too. But I think sometimes people forget to use good old traditional email, and I have heard that that is the most effective format to be able to spread the word about a creative project.
Yeah, it definitely is, because you've got people who are sort of already in your funnel. And people talk about sales funnel, where it starts out with people expressing interest, and then they buy something, and then they may buy more things. So you kind of, and they become fans of yours. And so you get them to respond from different ways. Now, I'm not very good myself in doing this marketing and the promotion, because I don't have the time to do it, and that's not where my real interest is. So I basically now, as much as possible, hire out to do this. But then you test out different things. Like if something isn't working, you do something different. And you want to look at what it is that isn't working. Is it the cover? Is it the design? Is it the title? Is it the subject matter? Is it the audience? Maybe you're not matching the correct audience for it. And so you want to test out all these things. So what typically you do is what's called A/B testing, where you'll make one change and then you do it again, and then you see whether that has more response. But then once you discover something that's working for you, then you increase your budget. So if you start off at $5, maybe then the next time after you find that something's working, you go to $10. If it's still working well, going to $25. So I mean, some of the people who are these super marketers are having budgets of thousands of dollars for each thing. They're spending millions of dollars on publicity in return for getting a couple of $1 million as a result. So I think you need to think about your career path, because it's almost like you have to do two different things. If you want to write, maybe you don't do all this marketing. It's the same thing with being a speaker. Speaking campaigns may not be to be a speaker, a good speaker. You're going around and you're traveling, or now you're doing lots of Zoom calls. And again, it takes away from your writing. So that's why many speakers use professional writers to write for them. So if you don't have time to do that, then you would hire a writer. But if you're a writer, you may not want to do all of these things to have a second career as a speaker, or have a second career doing other products and services. You just have to decide where your focus is going to be.
Okay, yes, you can always hire a publicist. That's a good idea. And so as a publicist, some strategies that have worked for me to go find an audience are, well, before coronavirus, to go show up at meetup groups, not necessarily writers groups, that's other people looking for audiences, but of groups of people who are interested in the topic of whatever I'm writing about, and go and introduce myself and talk and build relationships before I start telling them about books. And also to join Facebook communities and groups and pages related to those topics, and to get to know people and build relationships and get in. And then after a while of that, let people know about a book, and then start to friend people there. And then, because you have to get some form of audience together, and then people will invite their friends and their family and their colleagues and connections and get the ball rolling. But you got to have a little bit of snow first to get the snowball rolling.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah,
I've gone to a number of these groups.
Sometimes friends and family is not enough if they're not into the topic. You got to go and find people online and before the virus offline who are already interested in the topic, and then build relationships with them first, and then encourage them to go and to look at your pages and read your writing, and then to spread the word.
Yeah, exactly. I've gone to a number of business groups, and I've had flyers there. But when you talk to people in the first minute or so, you have like a 30-second elevator speech. You give your thing. You want to emphasize how you can help other people, not to not talk about yourself so much as that. And so that's another way. I didn't talk about that, but creating flyers from your product or service, or whatever you're doing professionally, and you give that to people at these events, and then you follow up. And there's a woman who does follow-up programs. Her whole speaking career and her books are all about follow-up, and so that's very important too. Is you collect these emails or business cards, and then you follow up. So one of the things I've been doing with them is I put them into a database, and every couple of months I might do a mailing to them to let them know about different things. And when you join these groups, You don't want to immediately promote yourself. I mean, that's a good way to get pushed out of the group. But you want to start a conversation, and then gradually in the conversation, you introduce what you're doing. Okay, should I go on now? I'm not sure how many slides I have left.
Okay, so we have well, Raj has a couple of questions that have to do with working with publishers and agents. So up to you if you want to go.
Why don't I answer those first?
Okay, yeah, because you're kind of in the film section of your speech.
Okay.
So he says that writing for film, it's important to find an agent. What's the best way to find an agent?
Well, if you're doing for films, initially it can be hard to find an agent because they're looking for produced writers who already have successful careers. Now, you might be able to, I mean, sometimes if your project stands out, it can help you get an agent. I've found that producers tend to be more responsive and that especially some of the smaller producers or independent producers, because some of the big studios, you know, they're doing these really big budget films and they're doing films based on already popular series like the Marvel series, and or they have an actor who comes to them with some idea that they've already created. So a lot of it is about people who are already family and friends. Now, and there are no rules because you can always break through, but it's much harder to do that. And so sometimes I found that it's easier to work with producers first, but you could still get agents that way. Now, publishers in the book industry, they tend to be more open, particularly if they like the idea, if it's different. If it's in the self-help business genre, you want to have a platform first where you have already acquired people, like if you're in speaking and you've got 10,000 people who are going to your workshops or seminars or on your mailing list, and you have, or 50,000 followers on Twitter. You're an influencer. So they look for somebody who is already established in some way. So, and that's very, very competitive. But if you have a unique idea, they don't expect this of novelists and people who are writing science fiction or memoirs. I mean, if you have something that stands out that's different, you know, then they'll be more receptive to somebody, and they don't care so much about your background because you're selling the project, you're selling the novel rather than yourself. But if you're being an expert as a spokesperson for a nonfiction topic in the self-help and popular business, I mean, there's so many people who have established platforms in that it's really hard to break in, and one possible way to do that is if you bring in somebody who's well known to do a foreword for you, or you have a few people that you quote in your book where it's drawing on other people who are experts. So that could be a way. So, I mean, another thing, I mean, sometimes people have done really crazy things, like they'll do a big, when people were driving, they would do these billboards, and, you know, they would get response to them. So somebody writes an article about the person putting up a popular billboard. And you know, you find unique ways to present yourself so you stand out, so you get media attention, and then that could help to interest agents and publishers and producers in whatever you're doing. Did I fully answer your question? Oh, and then I have a service that helps to connect writers to publishers, agents, and the film producers called Publishers Agents Films, and that's you can look that up on .com. I'm also trying to sell those businesses because it takes away from my writing, and so I actually created business plans, and I have little pitch decks that I've done for that, and so I'm adding that to as what I call a Vizio. I have my Promeo. We have all different kinds of Filmios for film projects, and Bookios for book trailers. So you'll see that when you go there. But I've created some business plans, and I have a database of venture capitalists that I'm sending it out to see if somebody will just sort of take this thing over, because I really need to grow it. I need managers to come in. So if anybody out there knows anybody, I have business plans.
Okay, that's great. And if you want to include your email address and website in the chat, that would be great, so people can reach you if they have questions or if they want to make an offer or collaborate.
I'm on the screen share. Maybe at the end, or you can put it in. I'm not
Oh,
sure
okay.
I know how to get to the chat box with my screen on here.
Okay, yeah, well, maybe when you're done with the
Okay,
presentation.
well, maybe I can go through the next slide just very quickly.
Okay, yeah, good.
All right, so these are examples of documentaries I've done. Whoops, let me go back to my screen. All right, so these are our different book projects. Wait a minute, I'm going back. I'm going too fast. Let's see, I am having some things that are turning up on my screen here. Let me get rid of them. Anyway, these are some projects that I've done, some show trailers for, or sizzle reels. They call them different names. If they're for books, they're bookios. If they're films, they're film trailers or sizzle reels. And this was for kids' book, and this was another one about a novel about a white girl and a black girl who are raised by in the South, and then they end up going out west. These were these other books I showed you about, and I have this whole series on Neanderthals, and I just recently sold that to a publisher. And these are song lyrics and poems that I've done, and I have a Changemakers Music has demos. If you go to my YouTube channel at Changemakers Publishing, you'll see all these videos that I've done for songs. And I have they're song videos, and then PowerPoint presentations. And these are some examples of music videos. These were I had somebody locally who I teamed up with who did this song, and those are up on my YouTube channel. So anyway, I'll skip through this, but you basically join a songwriting and poetry group. You can turn them into videos. You can use rhymes or free verse. You can use songs and poems to express your reactions, like I mentioned earlier, that people are writing poems about the coronavirus. And keep it. And also, you may not remember things if you have an idea for something and you think it's a great idea, and a couple of hours later you're not going to remember it. So a good way to do it is to write it down, keep a journal, a file of these things. These are some examples of memoirs I've done for clients. I've done some other books on social issues for clients. In one case, we did credit card fraud, where I provided the ideas, but she was a bankruptcy attorney. So we collaborated, and she basically gave me the links to the articles to use, and then it became, she became the expert on that topic. This is where people have already published books, but I've published them on KDP. In this case, he was going to get something through Book Baby, where he had to order 100 books for, I don't know, something like $10, $15 each. And I had them republished for him on KDP, and he got them for $2.15 each, and he could get as many as he wanted, so he wasn't stuck getting 100 books. Anyway, the 4 types of books that most clients want are memoirs to feel better, help others, describe their success in something, self-help tips based on programs they've been teaching, and business tip books based on their career in business. So, think about whatever you're doing, and think about, would it adapt itself to a memoir, to a self-help book, to a business tips book. And, then if you've had a troubling experience, a lot of times people will come to me because they've gone through some kind of trauma, and just writing the book is a way of releasing that trauma. If you've achieved success in your work or teaching about something, you can turn that into a book, course, webinar, or other material. And then these many other types of writing, writing blogs, you can write articles. Medium is now a great place to put it. E-zine articles is another place. Social media copy. And then I wrote some articles about conducting a campaign, and people like visuals, so I put a lot of visuals in these. Repurposing your material in different formats, and sometimes just reorganizing and adapting your material in different formats works, so you don't have to write something new. And also, if you have a larger book, you can turn it into several smaller books, or combine smaller books into larger books, so you can go either direction. And then I also been doing some website copy, and also, think about a website, and sometimes people will have different websites for different books. So, maybe, rather than confusing people by having all sorts of things in the same website, is to switch them around, and then you can have links, backlinks, which can help you increase your ranking by having these websites linked to each other, so you increase your being noticed on the search engine. This is the person I did these 9 books for, with crime books. Then you use your website for PR and marketing, and these are some examples of websites I did for clients. You turn your website into a book, and there's some formats where you can essentially import whatever you've written into the book. And I still work with this designer platform in creating books. They have a new platform with a lot of new covers where you basically take their cover design and then adapt it with your own material. Tips on using your website. You only have a website expected now. If you have blogs or articles, include them on your website rather than standalone site, because they increase your visibility. Use these links that I mentioned. And I would recommend using a professional web designer. I mean, you can create websites using these platforms, but sometimes they'll be, if they're free, they put advertising on it, they limit you. And so I work with a web designer, and so he's done some really great jobs for me. I've worked with him for about 10 years, and I can refer you if you need somebody. Audiobooks, and I mentioned you could just easily create them once you have a book on ACX. But you can also, sometimes people just do their own audiobooks separately, and you can just hire a narrator, or you narrate them yourselves. But ACX has very high requirements for the technology, so you have to really have good quality sound, have a quiet, have a certain room tone in front. They have all kinds of little techniques like that. All right, so I'm going to skip over this about the creating an audio book, but just mention that they outsell paperbacks, as I found with many creating many audiobooks. And especially now, people are listening to audiobooks as they go around there at home, and you can hire a narrator or get a shared royalty arrangement. And then you can turn videos into books, where you take screenshots and then you put them into books. This is a video platform that I've used. You combine photos, video clips, text, and music. And there's text-to-voice technology now, which I use instead of recording something, and I created over 100 of them for a client, and then I got into creating some of my own. So anyway, there are various platforms you can use where they have different types of backgrounds and text. They have animated clips, and I mean, it can look really, really professional. Some have all kinds of zooming effects and video clip effects, and then you put your wording on that platform. So I use these platforms in doing these video reels for people. Speaking to promote your business or book. So I wrote, I did some speaking, and then I wrote about my experience in speaking to help people with that. These are online courses, tips on creating a course. There are all these places for having courses you teach. And then finally, these are some power partners. When I do these presentations for business groups, they always ask you, who would you like to be referred to? So some of the people are marketing, PR, and media people, social media specialists, web designers, graphic designers, photographers and videographers, publishers and printers, and speaking bureaus, and event planners. And then, for yourself, think about who might be power partners for you in your own writing projects or career, and put it out there. If you belong to some business groups, those can help you make referrals to other people. And most of these business groups, there's one person from each field. And so there's groups like BNI, Business Networking International. That's a source of people. There's Meetaway that I just discovered. There are other groups that will put people together, and then Chambers of Commerce are another place to find meetup groups or meeting groups, and a lot of them will have these breakout sessions where people join a smaller group, and they meet on a regular basis. Usually it's every 2 weeks. All right, so think of your own team you might partner with, and then if you find people you work with effectively, you might keep them as a team and continue working with them. And you know, refer people to each other. If in these groups, usually there's no charge. Sometimes you would offer people a 10% referral fee. With some people you work with, other people it's just a shared arrangement. So think of the people who can support you while you support them, called your power partners. And you have lists of people that you can just go through your list and think of people who might be part of your team. And you contact them and speak to them by phone or have a meeting, discuss how you might work together. You can do Zoom meetings now, GoToMeeting. So I also put down my ideal clients are professionals and service providers with a story or tips to share, companies with products and services for a portfolio book, entrepreneurs and startup businesses, seniors and their families for memoirs, individuals who have had a dramatic or difficult experience, tell their story, individuals involved in social cause who want to write about it, and individuals who want to create a video. So if you know any of the people who do any of those things, please do refer them to me. And then, for finding your ideal audience, because when you're pitching your book, you want to think about your audience. It's not for everyone. People might think, well, I'm writing this for anybody could be interested. Well, within that category, think of the people who are most likely to be interested. You can think of it by gender. It can be by interest group. It can be by profession. It can be, by ethnic group. And just different ways of breaking down your audience and reaching out to groups that they might be a member of, or join meetup groups that they might be a member of, so on. So think of the different ways you can approach them, market it, think of both the content of your message and the best way to share it. And sometimes, as I mentioned before, you can take the same message, but just repackage it for different audiences, and then just republish the book in different formats. And then finally, put your plans into action and monitor your success, and then be flexible. So you're willing to change and approach as needed to better approach your audience. And then we also look for sponsors of these films, which is how we do them. So these are some examples of people we would be interested in for different films. So that you can just look at that as a list of different types of individuals who might be interested in being on our next film. Once we are able to get out of the social distancing, we're planning to do a film called Bad Relationships, in which we have, it started out to be, I was going to interview people like some of our other books where they talk about their bad relationships and how they're dealing with them, much like the Failure to Success film. But because of this, we're turning this into a feature film where we're going to have 4 stories. I'm going to be writing the stories based on incidences where actors are going to act this out. Because right now it's really hard to get people to want to, be interviewed and have film people come to their house. So even if we get back after the social distancing, I think for a couple of months it's going to be, people are going to be a little hesitant to be in large groups. So we're turning it into a feature film. So then that's the next film we're trying to get some funding for, is Bad Relationships. All right, and so these are tips for finding sponsors, investors. Think of who's likely to support you, create a list, prioritize, think of different ways to approach them. And then finally, if you want to have a strategy session, I can give people advice on writing, publishing, getting published, learn how to increase your business with different media, determine the best mix of media for sharing your message, and decide how to best promote your work. So those are all things I can talk about. And in terms of promoting your work, I wouldn't be actually doing the promoting myself, but giving you ideas, and then you would hire somebody who would do the publicity of the social media. And here people can write down my contact information and phone number. And then the other one I mentioned earlier was Changemakers Productionsfilms.com, where you can see our latest film.
Thank you very much. And I think Raj had one more question. He was wondering what to do when you're working with a publisher or a producer and they want to change your content to something that you're I either don't agree with or aren't comfortable with.
I think it's better to refer to the publisher because they have all sorts of ideas. Like with my Neanderthal book series, they wanted me to start out with, you know, how did they get to these Neanderthals being back? And so I ended up writing an extra chapter on how they got educated in the very beginning. And they also wanted some questions at the end, and they wanted to turn it into a little bit more of an educational book for the middle school market as well as adults. So I adapted to them, and I think that they know better about promoting a book of this type to their audience. So I would think, you know, assess what they're saying, and, you know, if you have a contract with them, usually the publisher is free to choose their own title. And so, you know, you have to defer to them on that usually. But I would just sort of look very, be flexible and open to what they're suggesting. And you might present what you prefer, and they might talk about it. But there's a whole marketing and editorial team that's usually behind it at a publisher. And generally, I think they know best.
Okay, thank you. And so everybody, thank you very much to Jeannie Scott